right. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Stephen DeLorme here on the live stream with Rev.hodl. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm excited.
So, for anyone who this might be your first stream in this series. This is part of a Bitcoin mining hackathon called the Battle of the Mine Hackers. And this is a hackathon that's focused on Bitcoin mining decentralization. And before we get into Rev.hodl's presentation, I'm just going to very briefly share a little bit of information about this event so everybody knows what's going on. Hold on, let me get my monitor situated here. Yeah, there we go. So this is the website for the event right here. You can go to atlbitlab.com and click on the hackathon link, or you can go to minehackers.atlbitlab.com. And we kicked off this event this past weekend, and it's going on for the next month. So this is a global event. And the kind of problem we're trying to solve with this event is that there's a lot of concerns around Bitcoin mining pool centralization. In the form of hardware centralization, the manufacturing of the hardware, as well as the centralization of hash rate and large pools and the centralization of block template construction and stuff like that. So this event is to encourage new builders to come into the space and get involved with open source projects that help decentralize Bitcoin mining. I want to thank our sponsors for this event, Clean Heart Spark, our TeraHash sponsor, our GigaHash sponsors, Pleb Lab and Hash League, and then our community sponsors, Choya Inc. and Cryobyte. Now, we got a couple different ways you can get involved in this event. We have three different prize tracks, and it's the same prizes for each track. There's a software track that's working on stuff like protocols like Stratum v2 or Hash Pool, stuff like this. So these are the software protocols that actually enable Bitcoin mining pools to operate. We also have a hardware track. This is for working on open source hardware like the BitAxe or the Ember One, or perhaps even repurposing older mining hardware to do interesting creative things. And then we also have an energy track, which is perhaps using novel forms of energy, as well as finding ways to reuse the heat from your miners, which provides incentives for people to run mining operations at home. Perhaps there's greater incentives beyond just mining Bitcoin. And Rev.hodl, I think, kind of fits. What he's going to teach you today kind of fits somewhere in between both of these categories, maybe a little bit of both. We also have a sponsored challenge from Hash League here. This is a dashboard for community mining pools. It's to encourage kind of competition amongst Bitcoin communities to get their meetup attendees excited about Bitcoin mining. So if you make the best contribution to Hash League, there's a 300,000 sats prize for that. We have an awesome panel of judges: Econo Alchemist from Food 256 Foundation, Scott from the BitAxe Project, Tyler Stevens from Exergy, Rob Warren from Bitcoin Park, and then two new mystery judges coming soon. We have several mentors as well here. Obviously, we have Rev.hodl on the stream today. We had a VNPRC yesterday, and we have several other mentor sessions coming up. So you can check out the schedule over the next coming week here for all of the different sessions with the mentors. We'll also be running some builder jam sessions. So if you're joining from all around the world, you can join those inside of the Discord. So there's a voice channel inside of the Discord where you can participate there. We'll also have, if you're in the Atlanta area, you can join us at ATL BitLab, our Freedom Tech Hackerspace. You can join us there in real life. One we're excited about is actually this coming Saturday, where we're going to be, we have a bunch of Antminer S9s that were donated to us from Choya Inc. And so we are going to be working with the S9s here in person. So if you want to get a free S9 to use for your hackathon project, you can come to the workshop and get one for free. Or if you want to, reach out to me on Discord, we can mail you one as long as you pay for the shipping cost. So yeah, I think that's about it. You can find rules, judging criteria, all that stuff for the hackathon there. But the best way that'll get you the most bang for your buck is just join the Discord, because that's where all the hackers, where all the mentors are hanging out and having very active discussions. So we have people talking about building lightning redemptions for Hashpool. We have people in there talking about building stuff with Blockstream satellite and like LoRa's and mesh nets and stuff like that. We've already got some people talking about a hackathon project for Hash League. So there's all kinds of stuff. There's actually a channel in there where you can find teammates to help you work on your project and all of that. So definitely join the Discord, because that's where a lot of the action's happening. Yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and bring back Rev.hodl's screen here. And oops, there we go. It looks like it's loading. So yeah, just I'll let him kind of introduce himself more fully, but I met Rev.hodl through the kind of scene, the Bitcoin meetup organizer scene here, and learned that he was doing a ton of stuff just in terms of home mining and heat reuse and all of that. And it's kind of staggering if you look at his Nostr profile, just the number of creative heat reuse projects he's done with his miners. So I kind of realized immediately that he would be the perfect mentor to teach you about these kinds of topics for the hackathon. So welcome, Rev.hodl. I'll let you take it away.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, it was great to meet, and I'm really honored to be a mentor in this hackathon. You can find me, the primary place, if you're looking to see all of my mining contraptions moving forward, you find me on Nostr. And so I'll be a mentor in that Discord. You can ask me anything in there. And if there's something that I don't necessarily know the answer to, I'll be able to contact somebody or get you in touch with somebody that has a better answer to your questions. And I just want to thank a couple people who have been pivotal on my mining journey at home. Chet and John at Ungovernable Misfits and the whole crew over there, the Pleb Miner crew. These guys, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done up to this point without the help of those people. And so I just want to make sure that they're recognized here. And so this whole presentation is going to be, I've been giving this presentation at Bitcoin meetups to try and help people realize that, mining at home is not so far out of reach. There's a lot of FUD around mining at home that it's always unprofitable and you're never going to get the sats back that you mine. And so I wanted to try and flip that FUD on its head and share with people some techniques and tricks that I've been using to utilize Bitcoin mining, participate in the network maximally, and get some sats KYC free DCA through your power bill. That's the whole point of this whole thing. So I'm going to try and showcase how you can use these miners if you hack them. Bitcoin miners are not meant to be used in the home. They're not designed for individual heat reuse applications. And so it's very fitting that there's a hackathon related to this subject, because ultimately, in order to use a Bitcoin miner for heat reuse, you have to hack it in some way or another. It's the perfect hardware for a hackathon. And so my goal here is for all the people who are wanting to participate in this hackathon is I want to try through this presentation to help you get your best foot forward, save some time and some money, and create a path for an iterative process, which will help you get to a proof of concept and then refine that proof of concept throughout the hackathon. So that way you can arrive at a really cool project at the end. And so I'm going to be sharing all the tips and tricks that I've gotten over the last several years. And you'll see all of the Bitcoin mining contraptions that I built and all of the hacks that I've done, all the ways that I've hacked these Bitcoin miners to do what I want them to do. And I call this giving my miner a job. And so if you have questions throughout this presentation, throw them out in the chat. I'm not going to address them immediately, but at the end, we'll go back through, we'll pick up all the questions, and I'll make sure I address as many as I can. And at the end of this presentation, I'm also going to continue to go through and further go into detail around each specific application that I've done, whether that's the hot water heater, the clothes dryer, the food dehydrator, so on and so forth. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I'm probably going to repeat myself several times throughout the presentation, but there's a good reason for that, because that will help to lock this kind of information in for you and get you familiar with some of the terms and my lingo and everything else. So with that, we'll get started with the home mining principles. These principles are what I've arrived at as the core structure for what you should use for when you're designing a system to be mining at home. These are some ways to think about mining at home to keep you profitable and to keep you from making expensive mistakes. And so there's some yields that you can get from mining. First and foremost, the main reason why I think most people mine Bitcoin, and the main reason why most people participate in Bitcoin, is to stack some sats and to gain some purchasing power. And to stack the sats KYC free is that's the golden target, right? That's what we're all after, is this way to get Bitcoin in a way which is private and can be carried on to the future. The second yield from a Bitcoin miner, beyond the Bitcoin that it produces, is it actually produces heat. And this is the number one way you can utilize, you can turn an unprofitable Bitcoin mining power rate into a profitable one, is if you can actually take that heat and use it for productive work. Beyond that, once you start to play with these Bitcoin miners and to hack them, you develop what I call intellectual capital, where you're learning about how to do electrical wiring, how computer circuits work, how heat generally works, all sorts of different things you can learn just by starting to follow this path of trying to mine Bitcoin at home. Additionally, you're going to be participating in the Bitcoin network. As we've discussed at the beginning, mining is one aspect of Bitcoin that's seemingly becoming more centralized. And so if everybody can own and operate some hash, you're going to be participating to another level beyond just running your node, holding Bitcoin, spending Bitcoin. Now, there's another aspect which I don't see people talking about as much, but transaction fee insurance. So when you're mining Bitcoin, you actually gain access to more Bitcoin when the transaction fee market goes up. You can actually fire up more hash rate, mine more Bitcoin, and then hold off on the transactions you need to make. And the Bitcoin that you mine during those high fee environments will subsidize your future transactions. And then beyond that, there's also the material capital of the miners themselves. These things, while they depreciate in value over time, they still have some value in sats. And so as you're collecting all of your different various miner paraphernalia, it's worth something. And so the KYC free sats, this is a picture of the latest version of my Bitcoin mining hot water heater. And so when I take a shower, I'm DCAing KYC free into Bitcoin through heating my water. Now, that's the name of the game. If you're running Bitcoin miners, basically you're getting this access, this consistent flow as long as you're hashing of some KYC free sats. In my opinion, KYC Bitcoin is the most dangerous kind of Bitcoin for the network right now. If there's any capturing of the Bitcoin network, it's through this KYC mechanism. And the more people that can stack as many sats KYC free as possible, I think the better off the Bitcoin network will be, and the better off you will be personally. Now, the second is the heat and the work. And so this picture is in the picture I call this is my first single S19 hash board miner running on 110 volts. I call it the Hillbilly Hasher, and what I'm using it for is to heat a cold frame and to grow my cannabis starts for the season. And so really, if you look at any electric resistant heat use case, if you can put some hashes in between the power coming out of the wall and the application of that heat, you're actually creating a more efficient system, a more beneficial system for the environment and for the world than if you were just to use that electric heat resistance heat by itself. And so ultimately, one for one, a Bitcoin miner produces the same amount of heat as an electric resistance heat system. And so therefore, anytime you can try and figure out how to put a Bitcoin miner in between the power at the wall and the heat application, you're going to be better off. Now, we'll go into the intellectual capital yield here. And so I'm getting useful knowledge. I've never soldered anything in my life before I picked up Bitcoin miners. And this is a picture of me modifying an APW12 power supply, which powers an S19 Bitcoin miner. And I'm modifying that, soldering some resistors on there in order for me to be able to plug it in to a 110 volt circuit. And now I'm getting access to all of the voltage modulation of that power supply. And I don't need to buy any modifications to the control board in order for the miner to still run like the Loki chip. And I've learned once again, about how to do electrical wiring and all kinds of other stuff through my adventures on Mining at Home. So you're participating in the network. If you're holding the majority of your financial capital in Bitcoin and you're running a node, I think you should also consider to own some hash rate, even if it's offline most of the year, and the only time you can really run it that makes sense is to just heat your house in the wintertime, or whatever small short-term intermittent heat reuse application you can do. This allows you to fully maximally participate in the network. And so this picture is this is the first Bitcoin miner that I got, an S9, which I initially started mining on my solar power system. I had since graduated up to bigger and harder stuff like S19s. And so I'm hashing the torch. This is a term that John at Ungovernable Misfits has coined. I'm hashing the torch onto another friend of mine who is taking that S9 and he's plugging it into his solar power system. And actually, since then, since I've handed this miner off to him, he has gone on to power up that or hash on that system with 2 S19s. So he's really hashing for free on solar, which is cool. You've got the orange pill and now you've got the hash pill, right? Hash the torch on, get somebody started mining, so on and so forth. Transaction fee insurance. And so, as I mentioned, the way that transaction fees are going right now, there's not this sustained high fee environment. We can see that the mempool has, blocks have been mined not full lately. There's been several blocks that are mined and they're not full of transactions. But there was times over the last year where we've had, and you could take the halving, for example, as an extreme example, where all of a sudden transaction fees have gone through the roof and you get Bitcoin blocks mined with like multiple Bitcoin in there beyond what the subsidy is. And so if you have some hash rate latent and you can point to a full pay per share pool, now you can soak up some of that fee environment in the meantime while you're waiting for the fee rate to go down to send your on-chain transactions. And so you can earn some extra Bitcoin by owning this hash rate and being able to fire it up. And then when the fee market comes down, you can take those extra sats you've got and then further pay for more transactions. So it's some insurance on high fee environments, right? You can take advantage of the high fee environment while it's happening with your Bitcoin miners, wait out the storm. When the storm goes down, you can take those extra sats and use them to make Bitcoin transactions. And so finally, the material capital. These miners, they do have some value. You can sell them for sats, and the best way to sell them for sats, in my opinion, is to bring your if you can't just give your S9 away to hash the torch and you want to get some sats back out of it, you can market those miners at a Bitcoin meetup. The best way to get a Bitcoin miner is peer-to-peer at a Bitcoin meetup, create that circular economy, move this Bitcoin equipment around amongst each other, and get people hashing as well, distribute that hash rate locally. And so now we're getting into the actual, beyond the yields of Bitcoin mining, we're going to get into the actual principles here. So first and foremost, stay KYC free. The whole Bitcoin mining enables you to, once again, DCA through your power bill and not have to lean on KYC services to acquire your Bitcoin. Use the heat. We've covered that extensively at this point already. give your miners a job. So if you can use the heat and then produce a product which you can then take to a Bitcoin meetup to sell for Bitcoin, now you're really cooking. And like I said, all these miners have to be customized. So you have to hack them in order to give the miner a job and to use the heat. So you have to be willing to customize your setup. You can't just take a Bitcoin miner as is and easily utilize the heat. There's usually something you've got to do. So you got to be willing to customize your stuff. Start small. A lot of people, they get caught up with overthinking their setup and then buying a very expensive immersion mining tank and getting all the BitCool fluid, and then they put their miners in there, and they didn't know, they had never experienced mining with immersion, and they they burn up their chips and have a terrible day. The other thing is when you do start messing around with this Bitcoin mining stuff at home, you're gonna be buying a lot of other doodads and little stuff beyond just the miner, and all of those little purchases you should denominate the purchase of them in sats, even if you're paying in fiat. Try and account for what that opportunity cost in sats was, because the name of the game, if you're going to be mining Bitcoin, is to get more sats at the end of the project than you started with. And so if you're not accounting for all of the extra stuff you're getting in sats, you could be having a miscalculation there in your profitability. And to iterate on that point a little bit too, is you cannot take the power efficiency in the firmware at face value. You always need to be measuring the power consumption of the Bitcoin mining application at the wall, at the circuit. Use your voltage meter and measure that power. You take your own measurements. Do not trust the measurements of the firmware. The other thing is, there's probably a lot of stuff that you have already laying around the house, whether that's extra Ethernet cables or what ducting or any piping. All there, just go in your garage and look for stuff first before you go out and buy anything, because you'd be surprised at what you can come up with, what you can utilize. And through this presentation, you'll see how I've accomplished this. But use what you have first in order to get your proof of concept going, because that's going to also keep your total investment in sats for your proof of concept low, therefore increasing your ability to be profitable. And challenge the status quo. A lot of the times there's, when you look just in at home mining in general, people will try and fudge you out of it. Say, oh, you'll never, this is a bad idea. You're going to, Bitcoin mining's just not possible at home. And so, and through my experience, there's just been a lot of examples in which nobody's ever done this stuff before. It's a wide open territory for exploration, and there really isn't any standards yet. And so don't be afraid of what the established systems are. There's plenty of room for creativity here. And then finally, when you're going to be mining some Bitcoin, and the whole idea of getting Bitcoin is that it's money. And so when you do go to spend that beautiful low transaction history Bitcoin, you should probably try and not put that back in a KYC ecosystem through an exchange. Try and spend that Bitcoin locally, keep your sats local, distribute it amongst your local Bitcoin meetup community, buy some stuff, sell it for cash at the meetup, whatever. So this is where I'm going to start to kind of walk us through my journey starting off in home mining. And so the picture we're looking at here is the first S9 that, as I mentioned, Chet, I thanked him at the beginning. Chet gave me this Bitcoin miner. Well, we actually made a trade for it. I gave him some produce from the homestead for it. But he helped me come over here and set this S9 up. And the whole reason why I got this S9 was to take the extra solar power that I was producing at my yurt and utilize it in some way. I rent this yurt out nightly to guests. And when there's no guests there, I would have the batteries topped off and the system, and I would basically be throwing that power away. And because at the time I was starting to participate in Bitcoin, this seemed like a perfect application for Bitcoin mining. I could just take the extra power, run it through a Bitcoin miner, turn that extra power into sats. And so Chet helped me set that up. And this is what really triggered my understanding of this ability for Bitcoin miners to produce this KYC free Bitcoin. Because now I'm taking sunlight and I'm turning into Bitcoin, and there's no way anyone except maybe the mining pool knows about it. And so this allowed me to really extrapolate that concept where I started to think, well, maybe this is the way that I can be buying my Bitcoin in the future. And so this once again, the stay KYC free thing is if you focus on keeping your sats local, you focus on not touching that KYC free or that KYC infrastructure, the whole Bitcoin network is going to be much better off for it. And Bitcoin mining is the perfect avenue for the plebs to get this DCA. I don't know if you try and DCA through like RoboSats or BISC KYC free, it's a pain in the ass. But these Bitcoin miners, you plug them in and you start hashing, you're getting a steady flow of sats. So use the heat. So this is the next step in the process here. So what we're looking at is so I was hashing on solar all summer once I got that miner on solar power. But when the winter came, all of a sudden I was starting to lose sunlight and I wasn't able to really hash anymore. I was just struggling to keep my batteries topped off as it was. And so I had this Bitcoin miner and I thought, well, if I've got it, I should be hashing with it. And I got to figure out a way to hash with it. And at that time I was playing around with the pleb miner crew and learning a lot from them about using the Bitcoin miners to heat your house. And so I thought, well, why don't I bring the Bitcoin miner in and just see if I can utilize the heat. And so the picture here, what we're looking at is that the Bitcoin miners are basically blowing their hot air directly into the cold air return of my furnace system, of my HVAC. And so I started off with one S9, and I learned that, one S9 made a measurable impact on the supplementation of my electric heat use. And so therefore, if one S9 was good, two S9s would be better. So I found a way to get a second S9. And so that first winter when I was mining Bitcoin, I utilized both these S9s and to great effect. Basically, I pretty much at my power rate, which is it was at an average residential power rate, allowed for me to subsidize the electric heat usage anywhere from 40 to 60%. Now, when you start to subsidize your electricity usage for heating up to 40 to 60%, that starts to get competitive with natural gas. And if you consider all the work and effort it takes to heat with wood, which I do heat my house with wood as well. I have a rocket mass heater, but that takes a lot of work to process all that firewood and everything. So Bitcoin mining, using electric heat with Bitcoin mining is actually starting. If you take that SAT subsidy and consider it, it starts to get very competitive with regular heat, other heat sources. And so the next step from there, from just heating the house, once the winter started to end and the spring came on, I still wasn't getting much solar power. I couldn't just take that Bitcoin miner and plug it back into my solar power system and hash away. And so I, once again, didn't need the heat in the house so much, but I couldn't really run it on solar. And so if I'm not hashing, I have this miner, it should be hashing. And I grow cannabis at the homestead, and I produce the cannabis to sell cannabis seed. And I thought, well, I'm growing this cannabis in this little cold frame to get a head start in the season. And you can see here in the bottom right picture, that's some snow on this little sliding glass door. And inside that box is the cannabis getting started. And so I took the S9 and I just used it to blow some hot air inside that cold frame in order to get a jump start on my season. So now I'm starting to subsidize the production of a product here with the miner. And so this is where I had to start taking good records to make sure that the Bitcoin miner was I was taking a system that did not require any extra heat input, and I started adding an input into it, thinking that this additional input would help my profitability. So I needed to know how much power I was using, and then also how many sats I was getting for the power. What was the subsidy there? And then do the calculation of, okay, was that a beneficial addition to the production of this product? And it turns out it was. But the point here is that when you start to use these Bitcoin miners to start producing a product or good or service, you need to keep records in order to verify that the application that you're using is efficient enough to justify the mining. And so now we're getting into the point where you've got to start this. Up to this point, I was just taking the S9 basically unaltered and just pushing the fans up against a space and blowing the hot air into there. And so that's the lowest hanging fruit. If you can find a way to just take a Bitcoin miner and blow the air in the hot air somewhere where you need the hot air, that's easy and that's good. But I started to graduate from that and I started to get other ideas. This picture here is jumping the gun a little bit. I just am so excited about this particular Bitcoin miner that I have to talk about it a little bit right now. But so what we're looking at here is, I call it the canola oil hash can. Okay, this is a like basically a small trash can with a single S19 hash board in it. And inside that trash can is filled up with canola oil. And so I'm using canola oil as the dielectric fluid to heat up. I'm using this S19 hash board to heat up that canola oil and then exchange the heat from the canola oil into my maple sap to help me make maple syrup. And in addition to that, this APW12 power supply that you see next to it is also modified with those resistors to run on 110 volt. So I've basically taken advantage of both the immersion mining techniques and this modified power supply technique. And through the combination of all of that stuff, now I'm helping myself make maple syrup. So I've totally customized. This looks nothing like a Bitcoin miner that you'd see anywhere else, right? It's just a complete amalgamation of a contraption. And so this gets to my point. You have to be willing to take these things apart, reconfigure them, and get creative about how you can put them together in order to get the use case that you want out of it. And so a lot of times this requires third-party firmware. So using stock firmware on the Bitcoin miners at this point, when you're trying to use them for heat applications, heat reuse applications, is almost impossible. You have to use so there's three big options right now, and there's several others if you start looking deeper. But the big three are, I personally use Vanish firmware. There's Vanish, there's Brains firmware, and then there's Luxor OS firmware. Those are the three that I see most people utilizing. And there's all these firmwares have different pros and cons to them, different fee rates, and depending on which mining pool you use, you might be able to get those fees subsidized, no fees in the mining pool, so on and so forth. But you can also creatively use the hash boards and the power supplies and the control boards as well by unplugging hash boards, physically manipulating the miners, as you can see here in this picture, in one way or another. And if you don't have the ability to convert all this stuff to run on 110 volt and easily just plug it into the wall to experiment, it really is not that challenging to wire up a 220 volt circuit. With a couple YouTube videos, I'm confident that if you're willing to take the Bitcoin miner apart and do something like this, you'd be able to also wire your own 220 volt circuit without an electrician. Do your own research on that. Be careful, but I don't think it's that hard. I wire my stuff with the panel hot. I use a Leatherman metal tool. I am like totally taking risks, and I'm fine. It's not that hard. So then the next principle is start small. So what we're looking at here in this picture to the right is my first iteration of the Bitcoin mining clothes dryer. And so before I even modified the dryer unit to accept the heat from the Bitcoin miner, I had to you can see some duct tape. The miner is at the top of the picture at the corner. And so you can see some duct tape around there. There's just basically like a regular furnace vent that I got from the hardware store and some aluminum flexible ductwork. And I just wanted to see and test and feel first of all, if that Bitcoin miner was going to be able to run just with this contraption attached to it, and so on and so forth. So I started with the bare minimum concept of how I was planning to pipe this heat into the clothes dryer to begin with. And then from there, I went and modified the clothes dryer to accept that heat. So start with nothing fancy. Just start with your idea, figure out the way to cheaply do that, and try it before you go and buy all the stuff and get that 3D printed coupling that would be just perfect. Just try and hack it together before you go and iterate further. And the picture to the right, or to the left, I'm sorry, that's an example of I wanted to take energy. I basically wanted to take biomass. I do homesteading, so in addition to this Bitcoin mining stuff, I'm growing my own food. I'm growing fruit trees. I'm managing 20 acres here. And so with that, I've got a lot of biomass that I could use to burn to create power with. And so I built a proof of concept wood gasifier out of, once again, just stuff that I could find at the hardware store. And you can see those clamps, those wood working clamps on that thing. I got this stuff for like $60 at the hardware store to see if I could make a proof of concept wood gasifier to make sure I understood how wood gasification worked. And through that process, I actually exploded that thing and realized that going bigger than that, trying to burn wood and turn it into power was beyond what the skills and resources I had was at the time. And so I stopped that project with only a $60 investment rather than going big, going too big too fast. So start small and run tests. So now we're getting into denominating sats. And as you can see in the top photo here, those are the picture there is the Loki, the Pivotal Pleb Tech Loki chip. And so this chip allows you to spoof a control board to thinking that it's plugged into an APW12 power supply for an S19, when really you're able to use something like an APW3++ or an APW7 power supply that runs on 110 volts. So you're able to spoof a control board to thinking that the Bitcoin miner is running on 220 when really it's running on 110. And so those cost sats. Then in the bottom left picture, you got wiring. If you're going to run a circuit, you're going to have to buy some wire to run the circuit. You're going to have to buy a breaker. And then in the bottom right picture, now you're looking at a power meter, a Wi-Fi dongle so that I don't have to run Ethernet cables, and then a cube tap for different ways to plug in more than one to expand my outlets. And all of that stuff will add up over time. You're going to end up buying all kinds of crap like this. And if you're not denominating in sats, you're going to be missing out on, you're going to think you're profitable when maybe all those additional things that you had to buy really slow down your return on investment when you're trying to mine at home. And so measure the power at the wall. So you've got to get one of these clamp meters, and you've got to measure the amps that are coming out of the wall if you're looking at 220 volt systems. And then the other in the previous photo here, let me go back. The power meter with my hand on it, that's appropriate for 110 volt applications. But either way, you have to be looking at some sort of device like that in order to know the true power consumption of the Bitcoin miner, especially once you put in this third party firmware and you're starting to tune it. The firmware will tell you one power measurement on the user on the graphical interface, but a lot of times what I found is that is like wildly incorrect, and so you have to verify the actual power usage, so then you know what joules per terahash or watts per terahash, what the efficiency of your machine is, so then you can calculate, how much power you're actually what you're spending on the power to run the thing. So measure the power at the wall. Use what you have first. And so this is the first example. Earlier on, we saw a photo of the canola oil hash can, and that was what I was using to help me produce the maple syrup. Now what we're looking at is the first iteration of that. And so here, there's inside that little Rubbermaid tub is an S19, a single S19 hash board, and that's in, once again, canola oil. And so in order to make this, I basically had a problem. I make maple syrup here at the homestead, and I doubled the number of taps. I doubled the volume of syrup that I was collecting, or of sap that I was collecting, but I did not double the volume of the ability for my equipment to process that. And so I had a bottleneck, and I realized quickly that if I could preheat the sap before I sent it into my reverse osmosis water filter, then I would essentially hopefully make up some of that bottleneck. I would widen the bottleneck up and get more sap processed through. And so I couldn't necessarily just go out and get BitCool tomorrow, right? That's kind of a weird thing to go and acquire, this dielectric immersion fluid. But I knew that I had to do some sort of immersion mining thing in order to accomplish what I was doing. And so the plate heat exchanger that you see in the photo That was something that I already had for homebrewing. All of the stuff that you're looking at on the table there was stuff that I already had. The pump that I'm using, this little DC, it's a solar water heater recirculation pump that I was also using for homebrewing. So a lot of this homebrewing equipment that I already had allowed me to try this S19 canola oil hash heating system. And so that the canola oil was the missing piece, where that was the most accessible, get it right now dielectric fluid that I can come up with. And so if you can find ways to get what you have first, like this setup basically cost me nothing except the cost of that canola oil, right? To be able to test out whether I could actually produce maple syrup more effectively with a Bitcoin miner. And then you could see the iteration from earlier that because I was able to prove that, yes, I can produce maple syrup more effectively by integrating Bitcoin mining into it. Now I can iterate and use an S19 hash board, more efficient chips, so on and so forth. And so by using what I had first, I created a low risk option for myself for then to be able to iterate upon. And so finally, keep your sats local. And actually, we'll go with the pictures first. And so what we're looking at here is my experimentation with direct DC solar mining in tandem with a hybrid grid tie system. So you might be able to see a red wire and a black wire wired into that power supply. That's an APW3 power supply. And so that's actually 12-volt power coming directly off my solar panels through my charge controller. And then there's the other wires which are coming out of that power supply going to my hash boards. And so I'm injecting 12-volt power right into the lugs where it would be coming out to go to the hash boards. And additionally, that power supply is also plugged into my inverter on AC. And so as the clouds go by, I can watch on my power meter the power from the DC power from the charge controller go down, and the AC power from my inverter and my battery system go up. And so the power supply actually regulates automatically the trade-off between the direct DC injection and the request for AC power to come through and power those hash boards. So that's an aside, but so keep your sats local. You're going to be earning some Bitcoin. When you earn that Bitcoin, you're going to probably want to spend it someday. And when you go to spend it someday, if you can spend it locally, if you can buy a good or service from another Bitcoiner, if you can avoid turning it back into fiat, and if you have to turn it back into fiat, turn it back into fiat peer-to-peer for cash at a Bitcoin meetup. Now you're going to be strengthening the Bitcoin network. In addition to that, I've got some other notes here. Rate tariffs. So the best way to learn about what is actually happening on your power bill is to go to your power company's website and look at their tariff sheet. And on the tariff sheet, you'll find all these different basically constructions for how they can charge you for power. And there's many choices. And sometimes there's a time of day choice. Sometimes there's commercial rates. There's all these different rates. And usually when you're at a residential place, they're just going to give you the shittiest thing possible. And if you don't know about these rate tariffs, then you don't know how to ask for a better power rate. But if you go and find the rate tariff sheet, you might be able to find something that is actually more beneficial to you than whatever your regular residential rate is. So definitely go to your power company, check out the rate tariffs, and see if you can find something that could be better. Some other things that you can do once you're starting to think about mining Bitcoin as a DCA through your power bill, some power companies will accept payment from a credit card. So now you can start to think about you're basically buying Bitcoin with a credit card. And if you're buying Bitcoin with a credit card, a lot of times there's rewards points that go along with that purchase. And so if you get 2% back on your power bill, now you're getting 2% cheaper Bitcoin. And so that can factor into your profitability calculations, right? So just consider that when there's different ways to pay for your power bill, and if you can, well, and my favorite thing to do is to find some reason to argue with the power company and delay making the payment, right? To tell them that, like, hey, you metered me incorrectly. There's this issue, and now I don't have to pay for 2 months. And in the meantime, I get to gamble to see if the price goes up and get a little bit more sats out of the deal. I'll get to keep more sats rather than spend those to pay the power bill. And the true price of Bitcoin is based on local demand, and this is what comes into keeping your sats local. A lot of times, people are willing to pay a premium for KYC-free Bitcoin, and so when you're mining this Bitcoin, now you can also market if you really want to send. Personally, I don't spend the low transaction UTXOs. I like to keep those for the future. But if you really get into a pinch and you need some Bitcoin or you need some fiat, you might be able to market those low transaction UTXOs for a premium at your local meetup and be able to prove that based on the observance of the transaction history of those Bitcoins. And so you might be able to get 4%, 5%, 8%. It all depends on what the local demand is for this KYC free stuff. But it's not to be discounted. These kinds of considerations can, the difference between if you can get 4 or 6% more for the Bitcoin that you're mining, that starts to take something like an S19K Pro from just below break even to profitable, right? So the difference there can make or break the ability for your system to be a beneficial one for you to be mining Bitcoin with. And so just to go over it again, so first of all, stay KYC free. Do not touch the KYC free infrastructure. Do not put your Bitcoin back on the KYC free infrastructure. That's better for everybody if you can accomplish that. And take baby steps. You don't have to do it all today or tomorrow, but work your way towards there. Use the heat. Give your miners a job. Make sure that when you're mining Bitcoin, think about that heat has almost as much value as the Bitcoin that you're getting out of it. And sometimes if you're producing a product, it has more value than the Bitcoin you're getting out of it. Be willing to customize the setup. And when you do start customizing the setup, start small, denominate all the doodads that you have to buy in order to build this contraption that you're making in sats. Make sure when you start mining to measure the power at the wall to get your true efficiency. Use what you got laying around first. Challenge the status quo. Don't let anyone tell you that canola oil won't work. Just try it. And then when you do finally spend the Bitcoin, try and spend it locally. And so that's the presentation. And so now I am going to just go through and break down a couple of the contraptions that I built a little bit more specifically. And I think we're going to start. Okay, so we already discussed this. This is the close-up of the direct DC mining experiment. And I plan to take this idea, and I've got a plug-in electric hybrid, a Chevy Volt. And so I think I can accomplish the same effect by tapping into the 12-volt system on that Chevy Volt. My power company has an electric vehicle power rate, which is 8 cents off peak. And so I think if I can plug a Bitcoin miner into my car while I'm charging it, I can just be charging my car all the time for 8 cents and then actually just be mining Bitcoin instead. And so this is something that I'm going to try out with my Chevy Volt. What I'm trying to do here is juice the wheels of your brain to start thinking about some projects that you might want to accomplish for this hackathon. So you can, I think, figuring out a way to mine Bitcoin off of an electric vehicle would be beneficial because, once again, the power companies, how do we decentralize mining, right? If we can figure out ways for plebs to get better power rates and mine Bitcoin profitably, then there's going to be more people owning and operating hash at a small scale. And so if somebody can be plugging a Bitcoin miner into their electric vehicle while they're charging it and getting that off-peak power rate, now you've just unlocked profitable Bitcoin mining for the pleb. So maybe that's something that somebody can try and figure out is how to mine Bitcoin off of the battery of off of an electric vehicle, direct DC. So this is part of the iterative process. Earlier on in the presentation, I showed a picture of me heating this cold frame with an S9, just blowing hot air into that. Well, now I've taken it a step further. I've taken once again, maple syrup season got finished, right? And so I had built this canola oil hash can to help me produce the maple syrup. Well, since I had this contraption, I wanted to figure out how to continue to use it. And so now I'm utilizing it to help me grow my cannabis starts this year. Instead of blowing the hot air, what I'm doing is I created a PEX loop under the ground of where I'm growing the cannabis. And so now I'm exchanging the heat from the from this canola oil into the ground below the cannabis, and I'm actually heating the soil and not the air. And when you're trying to start plants, the plants really want warm soil and not warm air. And so I'm actually probably, I don't know how to quantify it, but certainly the cannabis grew well this season through this mechanism, and I'm able to use a thing that I already built. And so I'm using bottom heat to grow my cannabis now instead of just blowing the air in there. And because of that, it's silent and it's more efficient chips with that S19. So here's another picture of a close-up of the canola oil hash can. And as I mentioned, I've modified this APW12 power supply to run on 110 volts. So you can see I've got it plugged into this power meter. I'm running at 826 watts there. There's these DC solar water recirculation pumps are like $10 on Amazon, and for one hash board they do plenty of volume in order to move that heat through even a small heat exchanger to get to keep that hash board cool. And here's a bigger wide scale view. And so this is another example when I iterated on this process. The first so in the next picture we'll see. So look at how much space that first iteration took up. I had to take up half the table, or with the whole end of the table, with all the shit that I needed in order to like try this idea out. And once I learned from something from doing it, now it all fits in the space of that one little trash can. And so as you move forward, you start off with this big inefficient kind of proof of concept thing, and what you learn from mining with it, and then you figure out ways to make it more efficient, to make it smaller, to make it better, and therefore more profitable, right? So here's a look at the hot water heater system that I built. And so I'm taking the same canola oil technique and applying it at a larger scale. And so I've got a 10-gallon water cooler there that's filled with canola oil, and there's two S19 hash boards in it. And you can see it once again. I've modified the power supply once again to run on 110 volt. And I'm keeping the control board and the power supply out of the oil because should I fail, I don't want to have to clean the oil off of those components. Anything you can keep out of the oil besides the hash boards, I'd say you're better off keeping it out of the oil, because while I have successfully cleaned the oil off of the components, it's a pain in the ass. And so as little as you can get the oil on stuff, the better off you'll be. And so the second picture here in the middle is the heat exchanger. And so I started off using that heat exchanger that I had for the hash can as from the home brewing setup that I was doing. Well, I needed the hash can and I still needed a hot water heater, so I needed to buy an additional plate heat exchanger. But the way I ran the system is I run it on the home brewing one first, and I actually earned enough sats through mining with my hot water that I was able to pay for this upgrade with the sats that I mined from the thing. So if you build the system correctly, start small, and with what you have, when you start to mine the Bitcoin, now you can actually use that Bitcoin to help upgrade. The system can upgrade itself, basically. And you're still getting hot water out of the deal. And so the final picture is the large scale view. And so I did not have to modify any of the plumbing for this hot water heater for me to plug in the system. I basically am taking the cold water out of the bottom, out of the drain port of the hot water heater. I'm running it through that heat exchanger, and then I'm returning hot water to the top through the pressure release valve. So I have a sidearm loop, water recirculation loop, that allowed me to not basically, I didn't have to even drain the hot water heater in order to do this. I just had to turn the pressure off and put the plumbing in, like make the connections, and I was up and running. So now we're looking at, there's something inside that oil though. I've taken the hot water heater concept to a step further, and I've realized that since I had this vat of hot canola oil, that's basically like a sous vide cooker. And so now I realized, like, if I just get a 1-gallon sous vide bag and put some meat in there and dunk it inside that hot oil for a few days, I can cook my dinner. I can mine some Bitcoin, and I can heat my water all at the same time. And so I've been cooking dinner with my hot water heater and mining Bitcoin for like the last 6 or 8 months now. And this is, once again, this is just to help give everybody some ideas on, there's no Bitcoin mining sous vide cooker out there yet. Maybe you could come up with one. Not have to have it be a hot water heater as well. Just make it a dedicated sous vide cooker. Another thing that I found the need for that I haven't been able to build myself yet is an egg incubator. Right. I think that you could make take one of these, like the Ember One, when that comes out. These more small. It's bigger than a bit axe, but smaller than a full S9 board. Those kinds of things where you just need a little bit of electric heat. Something like an egg incubator would be perfect application for that. Here's just another example of iterating on the process. So I started off with 2 S9s running up against my cold air return. Now I got an S19K Pro going into there. So even if you start with 2 S9s, eventually the Bitcoin that you mine will be enough to subsidize the purchase of a more efficient piece of equipment, which will then still be heating your house over the winter time. And this is just cute. So in the past, before, let me see if I got, yeah, okay. So first, we raise lambs at the homestead, and sometimes the lamb is born in the wrong time, right, in poor weather conditions or whatever, and the lambs can become hypothermic, and so you need to bring them inside and you need to warm them up. Well, in the past, before I knew about Bitcoin mining, what we would do is we would take a hair dryer and we would gently blow warm air on the lamb and sit there for 20 minutes, moving that hair dryer back and forth and making sure not to overheat the lamb. And it was hard to do with the hair dryer. And eventually, once I had the Bitcoin miner, I realized, like, well, I can just set it to 500 watts and I can just get 500 watts of gentle heat blowing right on that lamb. And so this was the first try we did of saving a lamb that was hypothermic with the Bitcoin miner, and it worked. We got that lamb. We call her Lammy. She's still with us today. But this winter we had some lambs born out of season, and so I took the same concept, but since I already had a Bitcoin mining clothes dryer, now I can just turn the Bitcoin miner on the clothes dryer and let the warm air come out of the clothes dryer and do the same effect and warm these lambs up. So we've successfully saved many lives with Bitcoin miners at this point. And so maybe there's, some way to think about using the heat in that regard as well. Okay, so here's just a close-up of what I had to do in order to actually get the clothes dryer to work. So I had to take my angle grinder and cut a hole closest to the air inlet of the clothes dryer, and then I put this port on there. So should I have failed, like if this whole thing didn't work, I didn't totally destroy my clothes dryer. I could seal that hole back up and continue using it as a regular clothes dryer. And so you can see iteration 1 where I've got the duct work coming down and going into that port, and just having the Bitcoin miner on the table running full bore, and it was loud as hell, and everybody hated it. Anyone that went into our laundry room, you couldn't even hear yourself thinking there. But hey, I was mining Bitcoin and I was drying all the laundry. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but we have several nightly rentals here, like this yurt, and so we're in the summertime. We're basically, our clothes dryer is running like 24/7, just trying to process all this laundry, anyways. So the next iteration was to get an inline fan and try and subdue some of the noise. So now I've got the Bitcoin miner under the countertop with this inline fan. And once again, this is thanks to Pivotal Pleb Tech. Their Nord board allows for me to control this fan. The control board can control that inline fan all in one go, rather than having 2 different control systems. Fairly straightforward. And so you put it in the box, you put the inline fan in there, and you run the duct work up in. And now the clothes dryer itself turning is about as loud as the Bitcoin miner is. And so it's very pleasant to be in there. And so you can see, you start with the proof of concept, bare minimum thing, loud as hell, sucks. And you just work with it, and you figure out a way to get a solution to improve that over time. Now what we're looking at, so I have a Bitcoin mining food dehydrator, and so I was originally just plugging that into the wall, and that was running in my basement, but I ended up with a lot of extra heat in the basement that I didn't need over the summertime. And so now I'm just basically combining the two systems together, my solar power Bitcoin mining operation, and I'm taking the free power, turning that in, using that to power the miner, and then I'm still using the heat from the Bitcoin miner to dehydrate. In this instance, this is my this is an allergy medicine that I use. This is a weed called purple dead nettle. I dehydrate that and I make tea out of it, and it's cured my allergy symptoms. It's been a miracle. But so you can also start to stack the systems together once you've played around with it long enough. Here's a look at, I grow cannabis. I produce the cannabis for seed. And so the easiest way to extract the seed is to dry the hell out of the cannabis and just basically shuck the seed right out of it. And so this is an old, let's see here. This is an old dishwasher that I had laying around. I hang the cannabis in there. And then this is an example of using two APW3 power supplies in tandem to power to get more heat out of it, but still remain on 110. So you can actually wire one power supply to one hash board, and then the other power supply to another hash board to power both the control board and the hash board, and get more. Basically, be hitting two different 20 amp circuits on your breaker, and putting that power all into one Bitcoin miner. And there's the fans you can see just blowing the hot air right up inside that clothes dryer or into that dishwasher to dehydrate this cannabis. I think that's okay. So the final thing here, I think this is it, guys, and then we can start getting into questions. But so this is just, you can see here where my fingers are pointing. That's all you need to do is solder these two little resistors onto this APW12 power supply. The picture at the top right is me testing that I actually succeeded in modifying it. And then you have to take basically a power cord and cut the end off of it and put in a regular 110 volt plug in order to plug this thing into your regular wall outlet. And so that covers pretty much all my mining contraptions, all the iterative processes, all my tips and tricks over time. And so now we can get into questions if there are any.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rev.hodl. So it looks like I'll look through the chat here. I didn't see any questions per se. You have a lot of fans in the chat here cheering you on that have been bringing their comments up throughout the presentation. We got Grant Miller, Sean Flowers, Tyler Stevens, Isabel Oroku, and Kevin Lewis all chimed in throughout the presentation. So yeah. I was curious about the suit or how you were cooking the duck, I think, or the rabbit in the miner. Was that what do you do for just kind of like general food safety around all that?
Well, so that's a good question. So because the oil does go below food safe temperatures for periods of time. Maybe I would say that it doesn't really go generally below 120 degrees for more than an hour, but it can. And so when I just basically make sure to time it when I put that bag in there, it's a peak heat. Like my water heater, it's more like a battery than an on-demand type of things. Like usually hot water heaters, they target a temperature 120 degrees, 125 degrees. And so when you draw off the water, those heating elements kick on and try and maintain that temperature. What I do is I just let my hot water heater get hot as hell up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit and charge the battery up and temper the usage of the hot water heater at the faucet. So when I take a shower in the morning, that if I put it on full hot, I would scald myself, right? With 150 degree water, but I just don't have to turn the hot water so far. I just mix it with a bunch of cold and it's comfortable. And so throughout the day, I'm draining off of the hot water storage, and the Bitcoin miner is trying to keep up with that. And usually it does just a fine job of keeping up with that. But there are times when we have so much usage of the hot water, like I said, the oil temperature can get below 120 degrees, and now you're in non-food safe zones. So when I first put the food in there, I put it in there when it's really hot, and so that way I've at least killed any bacteria that would have a potential to flourish when it does go to those lower temperatures. That being said, my wife will not eat any food that I cook with the hot water heater. That's just for me, basically. So she just refuses to try it. But I'm like, look, I've been eating this for months. It's it's fine. I'm not getting sick. she's still scared of it. So that is a legitimate concern. And you know, with this hackathon, maybe somebody can come up with a system that is a little less analog than mine, you know, that can automate this and really maintain the control of the temperature of that oil to the point where you can continue to heat the water and cook the food at the same time safely, guaranteed, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think one thing I think about in terms of heat reuse is that like uh, it it almost your kind of margin for profitability might be a little bit lower because if I think about if I'm just going to mine Bitcoin, you know, just to get the Bitcoin, then obviously I want like the maximum amount of energy efficiency and like I want it to be you know, I want as many, you know, like very small number of joules per terahash. But if I'm like really trying to use the heat, then I really think about it like I just want to get enough Bitcoin to where I'm offsetting the cost of the electricity bill or whatever. Like it doesn't, I don't have to be make the most amount of Bitcoin. I just have to, you know, you get enough to offset what I spent on electricity.
And that actually brings up a good point too, because like in the example of the when you convert an appliance to mine Bitcoin, you actually change the way you want to utilize that appliance. Like in the instance of I've already kind of gone over the hot water heater, but like the clothes dryer, for example, normally people want to like have that clothes dryer run for like 40 minutes to an hour, right, to dry the clothes in one cycle. Well, if your clothes dryer mines Bitcoin, really you want to extend the drying period so you're hashing for a significant. If you're hashing on and off, on and off, on and off, this is not what mining pools like, right? They want you to have that consistent hash rate flowing, and so you want to extend the time it takes to dry the clothes actually. And so basically my clothes dryer cycles are 80 minutes, and really it doesn't matter. I just keep the thing running, and I call it feeding the dryer, right? I just like have stuff ready to go, and when one cycle's over, I just shove more stuff in there and just let it keep going like as long as possible. And so through doing that, and I haven't been able to take really great measurements of this, but and this is maybe something that could be even a project for the hackathon, is proving this theory that I have, is that by actually lowering the extending the period, you're basically putting lower heat, a lower amount volume, like lower temperature of heat for a longer period of time. You're actually drying the clothes more energy efficiently than
Mm.
like I feel like my Bitcoin mining clothes dryer, it's making me Bitcoin, and it's actually spending less energy to do so than a regular clothes dryer would.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to test because I guess you're not using the heat element that's built into the dryer, so and you're also not using it as high of a temperature, so you're like you're not yeah, it's not getting anywhere near as hot, so you have to run it longer. I'd be really curious to know what the like get some data on that.
Well, so like if you measure, so the way my clothes dryer was working was that I put my meter on it and just to see what kind of power draw it had, and it would pull like 30 amps for like moments, right? Just for a short period of time, and then turn off completely. So the heating element would get really hot, and
Hmm.
then the dryer would suck the heat off of it as it would dissipate, and then it would turn on again, and so it would pulse on and off. And so when you're trying to like, and the same thing is true of like the hot water heater. When you put a lot of demand on the hot water heater, those heating elements will then kick on full force and try and very quickly heat the water. And when you're trying to inject heat into something very fast, that's actually less efficient. The heat transfer isn't as, it takes more energy to push it in there quickly than it does to just slowly build it over time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that even with my hot water heater, because I'm just running basically 500 watts continuous, that if I were to really compare it side to side, I think that the Bitcoin mining version of it would also be slightly more energy efficient as well. It just requires a completely different mindset around how you utilize the appliance. If the appliances today are built for convenience, and then they're trying to build energy efficiency into the convenience. But when you start to think about it, when it's Bitcoin mining, now it's like you're sacrificing a little bit of convenience to extend your hashing, right? To make sure that you're hashing all the time. And then you're just utilizing the appliance in a completely different way, which ends up being both beneficial to you in the terms of getting the Bitcoin, and then beneficial to you because you're also using less energy.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between like, I don't know, turning the AC off in, a building for the weekend and having to reheat or recool the entire, cubic, square feet of the place on Monday morning versus just like having the AC, kind of keeping the heat at a, or keeping the temperature at a reasonable or reduced level. It's like that shock. The whole system has to catch up again.
Right.
Um,
So are you willing to wait for it to slowly cool back down? No, you want it to cool down right now. And so that machine has to work really hard to make up for the loss of the energy in the flywheel, right?
yeah.
And so these Bitcoin mining contraptions or appliances are basically like maintaining that flow of energy in terms of a flywheel, if you think about it like that.
We
Whereas these
did
other,
get,
oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So yeah, like the hot water heater, the clothes dryer, they're injecting lots of energy and then stopping the momentum. Lots of energy, stopping the momentum. And I feel like that is inefficient, but it's very convenient because you get what you want when you push the button, right? You don't have to like think about how you're using the clothes dryer, timing out your loads and all of that kind of stuff.
So I pulled up, we did just get a question in the chat here. Scuff Josh, anything I can do with some bit axes or not enough heat?
Well, I think bit axes, if you had a couple of them together, because a bit axe is what, 60 watts, something like that, less than 100 watts, I think.
I think.
You could probably like that egg incubator idea. I think might be a way. Bit axes would be a very inefficient way to do it, but like you could probably pull something off like that. Um, just putting. I've seen Schnitzel has this bit axe in like a fish tank with Bitcool in it. Just kind of the bubble of the oil of fish tank is like enough to just dissipate the heat of the bit axe naturally without having to move without any pumps or anything. So it's like a passive cooling system. Um, but there might be a way to, and I've also seen who does it. Wrote shoot up. His name is escaping me, but there's a guy in I think he's out of Minnesota who did the water cooled bit axe, uh, and so there are some ways to get that heat liquefied. And once it's liquefied, then you're able to like utilize it in a more diverse format. But that's you got to basically think like, okay, what requires 40 to 60 watts of heat, and if you double it, 120 watts of heat. What application could you use that for?
Yeah, I think the egg incubator sounds like a great idea. And, if I can riff on that for a little bit, I think that the one thing I've observed, we have a couple of bit axes running in ATL Bit Lab, and like one of them we have with, or several of them we have with the stock, like little orange 3D printed, um, tray that you can slide them into. And then there's one that we didn't have a tray for, and so I hung it from a piece of wire. It's just kind of dangling there free in the air. And somebody noticed that it actually seems to be running a little bit cooler than the other ones. So just from that observation, they do like even in that small localized area, they can generate a good bit of heat. And um, I think it's kind of interesting because I think the BitX is this very like experimental thing. What'll be really interesting to see is like what kind of comes after that. Like I know that the 256 Foundation has this like donation of all these Intel like ASIC mining chips that they might be able to get to work, and there's also the mining dev kit that Proto has been working on. And so like right now we're in this kind of stage where like people are like kind of taking Bitmain products and kind of breaking them down and like finding interesting ways of using them. But I think the future is probably going to be very much the situation where we have much more open source chips to use and open source hardware to be able to use. And that will be really, really interesting because I think it'll be the types of home appliance products that you'll be able to build with those. You won't necessarily be limited by like having to break down Bitmain products. Like right now, you're in this situation where you either have to have something that needs enough heat to facilitate a full Bitmain hash board, or you need something that's like small enough amount of heat for a BitAx. But I think in the future, you'll have like a whole like wide range of stuff. And Jason just asked, probably a follow-up. Jason Branscombe asked, "Wait, what? Has he posted that anywhere? I've got a small extra fish tank, and that would be a hilarious living room decoration."
Okay, yeah, maybe a fish tank heater would be a good application for that. And to back up a little bit, too, so you talk about the enclosure design of the bit axe being actually detrimental to its efficiency because it's not letting the heat dissipate correctly. And also to add on to what you're talking about with the Bitmain products is like, yes, this is why we have to hack our shit, is because there isn't anything that we can just like build directly to like truly fit the use case. You have to hack things together with off the shelf parts, weird firmware, weird spoofing chips, all that kind of stuff. And so to the point of like, I think the enclosure design space is not really well explored for these single board units, right? For the hacked together Bitmain 110 volt single board units, like there's the Sat Stacking Pleb, who's come up with like the Slim 19, and he's got these really cool air baffles where you can put into a regular, you can put a single board into a full chassis of an S19 and get a lot more efficient airflow through for that one single board. But the enclosure design is a space that is really lacking, and I think there's a lot of room for creativity in there, whether it comes to the S19 single boards, the Pod 256 or the 256 Foundation Ember 1 is going to be designed around an S9 chassis. So you're going to be taking J Pro chips, putting it on a hash board that slots right into an S9. And so they're kind of repurposing the availability of the equipment there for more tailored use cases of more efficient chips. But yeah, enclosure design, orientations, like different fans. I don't know if the best fan has been figured out. If you look at there's the Canon, it's like this Canon space heater 110 volt thing. It looks like a baseboard heater. It's long and narrow, and it's got, instead of like a fan that blows the air through from one end to the other, it's got this drum fan, right? And sucking air over a long extended period. So if there's a lot of room for creativity as far as the shapes and designs of how to get these Bitcoin miners to do their heat reuse applications. That's definitely a space that's wide open.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think it looks like all the questions and comments we have in the chat. I'll probably go ahead and wrap this up here, but Rev.hodl, thank you so much for sharing with everybody, all the hackers in the world, all of your creations.
Well, I appreciate it. And hey, so register for the hackathon, get in the Discord channel, and start asking questions. Like I said, if there's something that I can't answer in there, I'll find somebody who's got some kind of direction to point you in, So get creative, start letting your mind turn, figure out a problem that you need to solve for yourself, and build a Bitcoin miner to do that for you.
Awesome. I agree 100%. Get in the Discord, join, ask questions. Remember to work in public, everybody. And yeah, all right. Well, thanks so much. We'll wrap it up from there. You have a great rest of your day, Rev.
So long. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.